अस्सलाम वालेकुम, सत श्री अकाल, नमस्ते एवरीबॉडी। थैंक यू सो मच कि संडे के दिन सुबह सवेरे, और मेरे ख्याल से इसको सुबह सवेर ही काउंट किया जा सकता है, जैसा आजकल जाड़े का मौसम है। 1 बजे से पहले किसी का बिस्तर से निकलने का मूड नहीं होता, लेकिन आप सब निकले। यू ऑल लुक लवली, जितना थोड़ा बहुत नज़र आ रहा है, एंड यू केम फॉर दिस पर्टिकुलर सेशन। वी आर वेरी डिलाइटेड टू बी वेलकमिंग लैला जागिएला टू पाकिस्तान, Windows XP. Um, Leila is a cultural anthropologist who hails from Germany, and she has spent considerable time in India in a Khwaja Sarat Dera. Or it's fascinating how I, as a Khwaja Sara person, and Leila, and I would like to say not just a transgender, but a transnational person who has to cross cultural boundaries and international boundaries, are sitting here together. And there is a table in front of us, and there is an audience in front of us, and we are supposed to talk about us, our community, and a book with a public that knows something, nothing, or absolutely the opposite. And that is what makes this conversation so challenging, because communicating inwards for an insular community that lies at the margins and is perpetually securitized and pushed into the shadows to fend for itself, with a public um, that only has an external gaze when it is looking at the community, is quite difficult. How much of us do we reveal? How many wounds are you going to be comfortable seeing? How many joys can you participate in and laugh and smile with us? It's that is the bigger unknown than the facts on the ground. So I welcome Leila Jagiella to be presenting her book today. And I want to start with a question that I already discussed with you last night. Today is, I think, the second week, the end of the second week of the first year, 2024, the new year. This event has been sponsored by the Goethe Institute. We just heard that Yemen was bombed a few days ago, and Germany was a participant, unfortunately, in that bombing. And for the past many months in 2023, we've been seeing a lot happen in Gaza and Palestine. And Germany, unfortunately, has been quite complicit in all of that. And here we are talking about a Muslim journey, regardless of whatever subjectivities we attach to it. So my first question is, Leila, how does it feel being German?
Oh, wow. Such a heavy and loaded question. And as you said, my visit has been sponsored by the Goethe Institute and also the German Embassy. So I'm not sure.
Thank you, German
Well,
embassy.
thank you very much. Um, so I'm not sure whether after what I'm going to say, they will still fly me back to Germany. But that's fine as well. I can stay here in Lahore.
We'll go fund your ticket.
Yeah.
Or you can stay with us.
No, I'm going to
Yeah.
stay with you. Um, no, it's been difficult. Seriously, I mean, I'm just joking right now, but it's a very tense and difficult situation right now. And I am also, I mean, of course, I wrote this book, and I'm doing a lot of transgender Muslim work. But my day job is actually at an organization called the Muslim Academy of Heidelberg, and we are doing a cultural festival every year that's called the Jewish Muslim Cultural Festival. So we bring Jews and Muslims together and do some cultural activities similar to what we're doing here. And of course, I don't want to complain because the people really affected by this situation are the people in Gaza right now. But my work has been affected a lot by the situation as well. And it's not the Jewish and Muslim communities in Germany that are the problems. Muslim and Jewish communities in Germany actually get along very well because they are both minority communities. They both have very similar issues. Both communities are very much immigrant communities. But there's so much pressure right now from the German state, which tries to define what anti-Semitism is and which tries to silence a lot of voices, actually Jewish voices that I'm working with. I'm working with a lot of leftist Jewish artists in Germany. I'm working with a lot of leftist Israeli artists in Germany. And the German state does not want them to speak out against the Israeli government. Can you imagine that? So that is a very difficult situation directly for my work. And then also beyond that, I think it's also important to point out that whatever issues of social justice we address in this world, they are all connected. And I write about that in my book as well, that as conflicts rise, as issues rise, and there will be more of this also with climate change becoming more and more of an issue, it will be women, minorities, and in particular, sexual minorities, including trans people, who will suffer the most. That is absolutely connected. So we have to speak out for justice and against injustice in any way, whether it's about Gaza, whether it's about trans issues. It all belongs together. We cannot separate these issues.
Thank you so much for putting that into perspective, and for highlighting how sometimes, not sometimes, I think that's a curse of modernity within itself, that states hegemonize violence, and not just violence. States also want to hegemonize speech on what gets counted as what. And which brings me to my next question. As somebody who was born in Germany and raised in Germany, and later traveled to India and engaged with Muslim India, we are seeing that you're traversing boundaries, not just across states, but also within states. And in Pakistan, at the very least, we often hear this argument, specifically when it's about Khwaja Sara rights or transgender rights, कि जी ये तो West की चीज़ है, ये तो West से यहाँ पे लेके ले आई हुई है. And we, as queer people and as trans people, very much know that that is not truly the case. However, I really want you to speak to there and here about Germany and South Asia, and also now and then, because your journey started at a certain point in time. There must be a date and a year, and politics, and global queer politics associated with it. And then there is a now, which is 2023-24, when we have a far-right Hindutva government over there, and well, we have what we have in Pakistan. So in between there and here, then and now, between these spaces and times, how much has changed, and in what way?
Oh my God, so much has changed. I mean, first of all, I grew up in the 1980s and 1990s thinking, like a lot of, first of all, thinking that there was not much space for me at that point in society in Germany as a Muslim, as a queer person. So there's this intersectionality there that makes things difficult. I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea. But there was some kind of optimism. There was this idea still in the 1980s, and especially in the 1990s, after the, you know, the breakdown of, you know, the what's it called, the Cold War stopped and stuff like that. And so people thought, oh, life is going to be better, things are going to be better. So there was kind of optimism. We thought things will definitely get better. As a trans person, there was not much visibility in the West at all. I was a teenager in the 1990s. I did not know what to do with this. I have to point this out, that at the same time here in Pakistan, people were already starting to do trans activism. So that was not connected to any global agenda. That was not connected to any LGBT issues. My dear sister and friend Neeli Rana, who just entered the room a few minutes ago, she started to do this activism in the 1990s already, you know, rallying people, going to police stations, protesting against the violence. So that was happening here already in Pakistan. In Germany, we didn't even talk about trans issues. So I tried to find out what I do with my Muslim and trans identity. I'm going to cut it short if you want to have the full story.
I think we all want the full scoop. I can interject and provide comic relief whenever you want me to.
Yeah,
But sure, please go with the full story.
I'm not such a comic relief person. You have to trust her for that. Yeah, so I didn't know what to do. Fortunately, in the 1990s, the internet came into our house, and I could do my own research. And I was always this kind of person. I love to read. I love to read books. I love to do historical research. So I did a lot of research about Islam, about our sources, and then also online I connected with other people who were in the 1990s, then globally, queer Muslims, trans Muslims, who started to connect with each other. And so at some point, I learned about the Khajasara community in Pakistan and India. I decided, okay, if, as soon as I'm old enough to leave the house, it was, of course, like every trans person, I had a very difficult process with my parents. It was all not that easy, and there were a lot of conflicts in the past. But as soon as I could, and I could assemble some money, I went to India and went to the community there and stayed with the community there. And at that time in 2000, and maybe this will be surprising for some of you, but I told you yesterday as well, the situation felt better for me in South Asia than in Europe. Because as I said, there was no trans visibility. There was, of course, the gay movement in the West, but no talk about trans. And suddenly in India, in the Rajasthana community, I had a meaning. I had a culture. There's a spiritual meaning to the community as well. There's a family. And there's visibility. Of course, at that time, nobody, किसी को पता नहीं था ये कौन लोग हैं ख्वाजा सरा ये क्या है ये ट्रांसजेंडर का लफ्ज़ तो इस्तेमाल नहीं किया उस ज़माने में और लोगों को पता नहीं था ये लोग कैस्ट्रेटेड है इंटरसेक्स है ट्रांस है बिल्कुल कोई मालूम नहीं था लोगों को लेकिन फिर भी ये जो रोज़ाना visibility that was there. And even now in Germany, when I'm interacting with Pakistani people or with Indian people, when I tell them about my journey, everybody has a story. Ah, yes, in my childhood, they came to our house and they were dancing. And, so a lot of people have some idea. Well, we didn't have that in the West at all. People were very unfamiliar with trans issues. So I actually, at that time, experienced it as very liberating to be in South Asia. And then actually, my experience was that here, especially in I came to Pakistan for the first time in 2007. And my experience was that here in Pakistan, things were even getting better for the transgender community, because there were more and more people who were doing this activism. Then in 2009, there was this official status introduced. And whomever I talked to in Pakistan was actually very open and was like, there was this attitude of, हाँ ये हमको बात करनी चाहिए उन लोगों के बारे में और कुछ सीखना चाहिए. That was very much the attitude back then. Things have become much more complicated in the last few years, I feel. The discourse has become very toxic. And I think it's important to point out that this is a global thing. You will hear, of course, have a lot of people in Pakistan. I know आपके खिलाफ तो बहुत मतलब लोगों ने बहुत कहा who will say they will use that topos of Islamic values a lot now to strike some point against.
Even for this panel,
Yeah,
people had an issue with why are you using the word Muslim.
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
There were laugh reacts on the social media posts for this panel. There were no laugh reacts on any other social media post. तो क्यों लोग समझते हैं ये कोई हंसने की बात है? हंसने की बात तो नहीं है, बिल्कुल नहीं है. और वैसे भी अगर आपकी आइडेंटिटी मुसलमान है, इस्लाम है, आपको पता होना चाहिए कि हमारे रसूलुल्लाह सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने मना किया दूसरे लोगों के बारे में हंसना, जोक्स बनाना वगैरह वगैरह, लेकिन वो लोग हंसने का रिएक्शन डालते हैं और उनके अपने आप को बहुत अच्छे मुसलमान समझते हैं और सोचते कि वो Islamic values defend करते हैं. But the crazy thing is, you hear the exact same things against transgender people now in Germany. We have a very toxic debate about there's a new law coming this year. There's a very toxic debate in the UK. I'm sure some of you know about this. J.K. Rowling played a role in that. In the US, of course. And it's the same arguments everywhere, but people just use the frame. They change the framework. So here यहाँ पाकिस्तान में लोग कहते हाँ ये हमारे Islamic values के खिलाफ है. UK में कहते ये feminism के खिलाफ है. USA में कहते ये transgenders तो हमारे पता नहीं ये Christian culture के खिलाफ है. So in every country,
Family values.
Family values, exactly. So everywhere they just change the framework, but the arguments are the same. वो जो arguments जो उसका नाम क्या था? नाम लेना है उसका मरिया भी जो मजहबी ने आपके खिलाफ इस्तेमाल किया, वो बिल्कुल वही आर्ग्यूमेंट्स है जो यूके में वो टर्फ फेमिनिस्ट इस्तेमाल करते हैं. एक ही बात है. So it has nothing to do with Islamic values. It has nothing to do with feminism. It's just people use these frameworks to give value to their own prejudices.
Which brings me to my next question, which is going to be a little more timely and complex, or not. I'm just qualifying it myself. And it's in relationship to Pakistan and India. क्योंकि हमें ये नज़र आता है, and by the way, brilliant Urdu, by the way, guys, come on.
कोशिश कर रही हूँ. कभी कभी जब यहाँ मैं रंगमंच पे बैठ रही हूँ तो बहुत सेल्फ कॉन्शियस बन जा रही हूँ और थोड़ा सा मुश्किल है मेरे
We
लिए
are very
कभी.
impressed आपका पाकिस्तान में रिश्ता हो सकता है. You've just missed the शादी season. Otherwise, full on scene था बहन. हो सकता था कुछ ना कुछ. But coming back to Pakistan and India, and speaking about global trends, of course, we all know that transphobia in South Asia and has predominantly been a Western import. अगर हम लोग 19th century से start करते हैं with the advent of British colonization, to educate the public over here, सबसे पहले Criminal Tribes Act 1 introduce किया गया by the British Empire, which criminalized an entire swathe of tribes which were resisting the British Empire. And chief among them were the Tawaifs and the Khwaja Saras and the Mirasis, because they were, they were the anchors of the culture. And Khwaja Saras were warriors. Hyderabad, दक्कन के अंदर जो 6 अफवाज थी, उनमें से 3 से 4 अफवाज के लीडरान ख्वाजा सरा थे. पद्मावत में एक इतनी ग्रोटिस्क रिप्रेजेंटेशन दी गई है मुसलमानों की, अलाउद्दीन खिलजी की, मगर वो भी डिनाई नहीं कर सके कि उसका मिलिट्री लीडर मलिक गफूर वाज अ ख्वाजा सरा, जिसके लिए वो मॉडर्न मजाक उन्होंने इस्तेमाल किए ना, फ्रॉम द साइड ऑफ द राजपूत एम्पायर इन द मूवी. वो मजाक इस्तेमाल करते हैं कि जी ये ना इधर है ना ये उधर है, इसको आप इनकी रखेल समझें. यूं करके उन्होंने टर्मिनोलॉजी इस्तेमाल की, बट दे कुडंट डिनाई दैट एज वेल. लखनऊ अवध के अंदर जो लास्ट फाइट थी, विच वाज लेड बाय द बेगमात, द तवाइफ्स एंड द ख्वाजा सराज, हम लोगों ने मॉडर्न डे के अंदर जो विजुअल देखा है, दैट हैज बीन ऑफ द बेगिंग एंड द डांसिंग ख्वाजा सरा. एंड इफ यू गो आउट रात के टाइम पे, आप शहरों के अंदर अगर निकलें, जो कि ज़्यादा मौका मर्दों को मिलता है, औरतों को कम मिलता है, तो मर्दों ने देखा होगा, यू ऑल्सो सी ख्वाजा सरा स्टैंडिंग इन द स्ट्रीट, which are who are evidently soliciting. Of course, sex work ही हो रहा है किसी तरीके से. That has been the visual, but that is not the visual that is etched into the memory of the Khwaja Sara community to this date. For instance, I have multiple educations. I am part of the Sindhi Gharana. मेरा ताल्लुक नागुरु परिवार से है ख्वाजा सराओं के अंदर. We won't delve into that history today, but just to point that out. मगर हमें भी बारहा वो वाली ओरल हिस्ट्री याद कराई जाती है. मोहम्मद बिन कासिम के साथ आगा जात आए थे, जिनमें से एक आगा जो है वो खाना काबा की सफाई किया करते थे. वो यहाँ पे रुक गए. उन्होंने हमारे बुजुर्गों को ये सिखाया, हमारे बुजुर्गों ने हमें ये सिखाया, तुम्हें ये सीखने की ज़रूरत है. जिसके बाद मेरी बेइज्जती होती है फॉर नॉट कवरिंग माई हेड. वही सारी कहानी सारी की सारी. बट या यू गेट द पॉइंट. दैट इज द मेमोरी दैट वी ग्रो अप विद इन द ख्वाजा सरा कम्युनिटी. आउटवर्डली हमारा विजुअल डिफरेंट है. But Leila, within this global rhetoric of anti-gender, gender critical, anti-trans movement, there is something unique that is also happening in Pakistan and India. And that is the right of far-right Hindutva populism in India. And well, Pakistan has always been high on political Islam, which nobody has been able to define yet. And as a result of that, we are seeing कि ख्वाजा सरा community के अपने अंदर far-right religious factions पैदा हो रही हैं, with Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi in India recently pandering to, the Brahminical supremacy. And then we have a far-right Khwaja Sara movement in Pakistan, which is aligning itself with the Jamaat-e-Islami and countering the modern-day Khwaja Sara movement. How do you interpret this rise? And do you think it's confrontational? Is it informing each other? The rise of Hindutva, Khwaja Sarayat, ek tarike se, in India, and the rise of this far-right transgender ek tarike se movement in Pakistan with the Toba culture and all of that. What is this? How do you see this? Do you see it in isolation? Is it unique? Or do you see some similar streaks happening elsewhere in the world too?
It's definitely, first of all, the situation in India and in Pakistan, they are, of course, mirroring each other. And as you said, yes, we here now have, it's not very super strong, but there is this issue of certain members of the Khaja Sara community having adopted this kind of new pious Tablighi Jamaat kind of outlook, which is not, it wasn't like that in the past. In the past, what happened is we had this thing that if you want to be a big guru in the community, you should go for Hajj, of course. And then after Hajj, people often become a bit more ascetic, and they will wear white clothes and they won't go out anymore and dance and all of that. So, but it's not something that young people were supposed to do. And now suddenly there's this movement. On the other hand, as you mentioned, yes, Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, who has done great activist work. मैं ये नहीं कहती हूँ कि वो उन्होंने बहुत अच्छा काम किया पहले, लेकिन अभी she's pandering a lot to this Hindutva nationalism. Of course, this is also part of survival. Like, how are you going to survive? Of course, and you have to. In आजकल हिंदुस्तान में ये तो कोई मतलब हमारी इस्लामी इसको तुरास कहते हैं, इसका कोई कदर तो नहीं है वहाँ पे. And your Muslim community is marginalized. So in the past, all the Khajasara houses in India as well were officially Muslim. Even though, of course, there are Hindus and others in the houses, but it was important to be attached to the Muslim saints and to identify as Muslim. They are not that outspoken about this anymore because, of course, as Muslims, they are marginalized in India. And what Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi is doing is I would say it's a survival strategy, whether consciously or not. And the same is happening here as well. And we see the same all over the world, that you have people in our communities who try to pander to the official discourses because they think that will help them survive. We have it in Germany as well. We have some trans people, but also gay people, members of other minorities who are pandering to the Islamophobic, racist German right wing, because they think even though that right wing is, actually against trans people as well, but they think if they pander to that, if they give them their vote, maybe they will protect them and support them. And and sometimes this may be consciously that people really think that way, but I also think it's just something in the air, of course, that people are afraid, people are paranoid, everybody wants to find some kind of place in the world, and it's not easy for us. It's not easy to remain outspoken and honest, and it's not easy.
I think that's an absolutely brilliant location of the emergence of this new political class and where you located it within a survival strategy. Um, because queer people and trans people in particular, I mean, even biologically speaking from a purely neurobiological perspective, we are always surviving. We've been surviving since we were born. We were surviving since we started speaking our first words and stepped into the school in boys' shorts and a boy cut and boy clothes, assuming our parents are under the assumption that, oh, if we dress her up as a boy and we present her as a boy, nobody's going to notice. But everybody notices and everybody notes. And this deliberate forcing of the trans feminine body into a masculine role then puts a target on her back. And she's consistently navigating and negotiating strategies of survival. And as you age across the life cycle, those strategies change and they evolve. So now locating it in adults, now that we are adult trans women and adult Khwaja Saras in India, and Hijras is the predominant term in India, in Pakistan and India, our survival strategies also become political, where we start pandering to whoever we think has power. And somehow, if we climb under the shadow of that power, somehow we are going to be rescued. And in this exercise, we create boogeymen. I am not the enemy. That person is the enemy, or those people are the enemy. Or we call this target shifting, when you shift the target from one person onto other people. And we've seen a lot of reactionary homophobia from trans women in Pakistan and India. And we, in a very similar breadth that we are seeing, like you pointed out, we are seeing reactionary transphobia from gay men in the West. For instance, even on Twitter right now, when Sindh Murat March released a statement of solidarity and took out a protest in favor of Palestine, specifically against pinkwashing, that this can't happen, we got a lot of those messages: chickens for KFC, all of them white gay men, obsessed with partying in Tel Aviv. And of course, I was having a lot of Twitter fights with them, which is my personality. But we are seeing this. We are seeing reactionary homophobic rhetoric from Khwaja Sara people and Hijra people in Pakistan and India. And we are seeing reactionary transphobic rhetoric from gay men, sometimes lesbian women, but mostly gay men in the West as well. Do you think this is helpful, or do you think this is harmful
Obviously,
as a survival strategy?
no, obviously it's not helpful because in the end, it may seem like a survival strategy for a while, but in the end, everybody will be thrown under the bus. This is what happens, and um, we're already seeing that in the US and the UK, for example, that people started with this anti-transgender rhetoric, and then, as you said, yes, there were members of the gay community who joined it actually because they thought there was something in it for them. But now the discourse there is already shifting, that it's also, becoming very, very much against all people that can be understood as sexual minorities. So it's never working out very well in the end. It's always getting to get you as well. So I think, as I said in the beginning as well, all social justice issues should be thought together, whatever it is, and we should all stand together. And we do that a lot in Germany as well, which may surprise people because here now, due to this stupid activism, I mean the counter activism I'm talking about, um, people think now that the trans people and Islam are antagonistic. But for example, in our context in Germany, we try to say, no, we are all minorities there. We all have an interest in having a diverse society where everybody can have their rights and their expressions. And this is also from an Islamic perspective, this is fine. People don't realize this क्योंकि वो जो लोग जो कहते हैं कि इस्लाम में LGBT का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है, वो लोग ठीक कहते हैं दरअसल, लेकिन वो खुद ये अल्फाज ठीक नहीं समझते हैं. हाँ, LGBT का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट नहीं है इस्लाम में. इस्लामी शरीयत में बस फेल अमल का कॉन्सेप्ट है.
शनाख्त का नहीं है.
शिनाख्त का नहीं है और सेक्सुअल ओरिएंटेशन का भी नहीं है. सेक्सुअल ओरिएंटेशन का कोई डिस्क्रिमिनेशन नहीं है इस्लाम में. जब आप पुराने ज़मानों की किताबों में देखते हैं, वो जो उलमा जो होते थे, वो कहते थे नहीं, कोई फ़र्क नहीं है अगर एक मर्द को औरतों की खूबसूरती पसंद है या लड़कों की खूबसूरती पसंद है. खूबसूरती तो खूबसूरती है, इसके बीच में कोई फ़र्क नहीं है. लेकिन अमल फेल ये मसला शरीयत इस्लाम में. So it's true, there is no concept like that in Islam. So even from an Islamic perspective, हम कह सकते हैं कि हर इंसान के हुकूक होते हैं. Everybody has a right not to be discriminated, to be respected, to be treated as a human being. It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or whether you're a man or you're a Khaja Sara or whether you're gay or lesbian. It doesn't matter. Islam में ये भी शामिल है, ये perspective.
Which brings me to almost we are getting to the close of our conversation before we move to the audience for questions. Thank you so much for bringing that up, and because this creates a segue for my last question. Contrary to popular belief, जो दुनिया में लोगों को पता है, Western transition is very dissimilar to South Asian nirbaniyat का जो हमारा concept है. In the Western gender transition discourse, you kind of remain within the binary. You are moving from a state of 1 to a 2 or a 0 to a 1. You're moving from man to woman. Whereas in the South Asian concept of Khwaja Sarayat and Hijrpan, you are unsexing yourself. You are desexing yourself. So if I have to speak from a similar lens as I described before you, what state are you moving to what state? You're moving from a state of manhood to a state of almost sexual adolescence. Number one, that's a major difference. That it's not becoming, it's unbecoming. It's not sexing yourself into another sex. It is unsexing yourself into the pure and into the pious. सेकेंडली ख्वाजा सरायत के अंदर पारसाई का और फ़कीरी का कॉन्सेप्ट है when it comes to sexuality. Which takes me to my question as you spoke about fail. And होता ये है हमारे यहाँ कि अक्सर औकात अल्फाज को हम लोग कैच ऑल फ्रेजेस बना लेते हैं. And I think one such phrase is homosexuality. And when people say कि जो Islam forbids homosexuality, so what people are basically saying is Islam is forbidding anal sex between two adult men. But you create this catch-all phrase, homosexuality, which by the way is a ridiculous phrase within itself. What does it even mean? It was coined what, a few hundred years ago, 120 years ago barely. What does it even mean? So एक उस फेल की जैसे आपने बात की कि उसकी मुमानियत जरूर है और इस पर कोई डिनाइल भी नहीं है. We can't like go this way or go that way to talk about it. But that is what is, the problematic thing when it comes to Shariat Islam. And within the indigenous Khwaja Sara and Hijra community, it is already looked down upon. Because हमारे यहाँ पारसाई का और फुकर का concept है. So bringing that into the conversation about a Muslim transgender journey, how was that discovery for you? Finding that out when you moved to South Asia and you moved into a Muslim Khwaja Sarat Dera, about what that relationship is theoretically and philosophically, but how in practice, how in reality, it is quite different because you also have to survive through sex work. And by answering to and responding to the needs of heteropatriarchal sexual desires, which are anal sex. You can say whatever you want to say कि इस्लाम ये कहता है या मेरी ख्वाजा सरा इस्लामी सकाफत ने मुझे ये सिखाया है और मेरे पुराने गुरुओं की पहचान ये थी, हमारी साख्त ये थी कि हम फ़कीरी के अंदर हैं और पारसाई के अंदर हैं. मगर अगर रोटी कमानी है और ज़िंदा रहना है तो आपके ख्वाजा सरा जिस्म से कुछ एक्सपेक्टेशंस हैं हमारे मर्दाना मुआशरे की, वो नहीं पूरी करोगी तो गोलियां बजेंगी सर के अंदर. How do you navigate that and how do you explore that in your book?
Well, I was just remembering a couple of years ago, I was here in Lahore as well, sitting on a panel, and Neely was also there on that panel in 2017, मुझे लग रहा है, जब हम लम्स में पैनल में बैठ रहे थे ना. और उस वक्त ऑडियंस में एक शख्स ने कहा कि हाँ, मुझे लग रहा है कि ख्वाजा सराओं को अपने आप को भी इंटीग्रेट करना है माशरे में, और शायद अगर उसका सुलूक बेहतर बन जाएगा, माशरे उनको एक्सेप्ट करेंगे. तो मैंने सोचा ये क्या, ये कौन सा माशरा है, कौन है ये माशरा. माशरा तो हम सब ही है. ख्वाजा सरा है भी, मतलब माशरे का एक हिस्सा ना. और वो जो मर्द लोग जो ख्वाजा सराओं का सेक्स वर्ड इस्तेमाल करते हैं, वो भी माशरे का एक हिस्सा है. So that is society as well, but there's this hypocrisy that is blaming the marginalized community for these things and is not looking at the fact that it's coming, as you said, it's coming from the patriarchal society that is establishing this. If Khaja Saras had opportunities to do something else, they would do this, of course. And yeah, and it is, as you say, it's a very complicated situation. That when I came to India and then later to Pakistan, I experienced the spiritual meaning of the culture as very empowering, because it gave me a space in Islam. It gave me a meaning. It gave me something that fulfilled me in a spiritual way. And मैं बहुत ऐसी इंसान हूँ, मैं बहुत बड़ी मौलाई हूँ, मैं औलिया खुदा को बहुत इज्जत देती हूँ, और तसव्वुफ में मेरी बहुत दिलचस्पी है बहुत. So I love that here we don't have that in the West, a community like that who has this spiritual meaning. And then at the same time, you see all these issues surrounding it, all these issues of marginalization, of discrimination, of having to survive, of having no opportunities in society, having especially, मतलब टोली पे जाना, इसका एक वक़ार भी है. That is a very good established traditions, that people have this old belief that we can give dua and bad dua and all of that. That's a very, very, like, it's also a very spiritually fulfilling position, right? But now with this new globalizing Islam also, and people coming back from Saudi Arabia and from the Gulf and thinking,
And the UK.
and the UK and thinking, हाँ ये तो हमारा बरे सगीर का इस्लाम, ये तो असली इस्लाम नहीं है वगैरह वगैरह, जो गलत बात है. ये इस्लाम भी असली है. और मुझे दरअसल लग रहा है ये इस्लाम it's much closer to the Islamic roots here, because the Arab countries have been much more modernized, actually.
Yeah.
Socially, I mean. So, but of course, now that this is happening and less people believe in dua and bad dua, the simple Khaja Saras can't even survive much on that kind of work anymore. So, of course, function pe jana, sex work karna, it becomes more and more important, and it's the only way to survive. If you have no formal education and you cannot do anything else, of course, what to do. That is a social issue. That is not a failure of the Khajasara community. It's a failure of society.
Thank you so much for bringing that perspective into the conversation about molayat and tasawwuf, and specifically the linkage of the Toli culture with economy. So allow me to elaborate for our audience over here what Toli means. आप लोगों को शायद कभी आपने नोटिस किया हो कि जुमेरात के दिन कभी कभार ख्वाजा सरा आते हैं, दुआएं वगैरह दे देते हैं, पैसे मांगते हैं कि जी आज जुमेरात का दिन है, हमें दिया जाए. जुमेरात का दिन एक स्पेशल दिन कंसिडर किया जाता है फॉर सूफीज़म एटसेट्रा एज वेल. वो टोली का एक एंशिएंट कल्चर है जिसमें हुआ ये करता था बरसगीर पाक हिंद के अंदर कि एक टोला, एक ग्रुप जाता था जिसके अंदर स्ट्रीट थिएटर भी था, उसके अंदर मजहब की बात भी होती थी, किसी की अगर शादी हुई है तो उसको दुआ भी दी जाती थी, थोड़ी सी एंटरटेनमेंट जुगतबाजी भी हो जाती थी, जैसे गिद्दा होता है पंजाबी का, किसी का बेटा पैदा हुआ है, बेटी पैदा हुई है तो उसको दुआ भी दे दी जाती थी, अच्छी बात भी कर दी जाती थी. नीली कुछ कहना चाह रही हैं?
पंजाब का जो कल्चर है उसमें टोली होती है कि साथ में चेले होते हैं और एक बाजा बजाने वाला होता है, ढोलक बजाने वाला होता है. तो जिसके घर में बेटा होता है वहाँ पे जाया जाता है. बेटी जहाँ पे होती है वहाँ पे बधाई नहीं दी जाती, सिर्फ बेटे की शादी में बेटा पैदा होने पे टोली के सिस्टम की जो एक मजबूती है उसमें एक मखसूस एरिया उनके पास ही होता है. तो सदियों से एक स्टाम्प पेपर्स के ऊपर लिखा होता है कि ये एरिया उनका है, किसी एरिया में जाना है, दूसरे कम्युनिटी के लोग वहाँ पे नहीं आ सकते. जुमेरात को उनका ऑफ होता है, बाकी उनका सुबह उन्होंने निकलना होता है, अपनी गली कूचों में जाना होता है, वहाँ पे दवाएं देनी होती है, वहाँ पे नाते भी पड़ती हैं, इंटरटेन भी होता है, वहाँ पे परफॉर्मेंस बांध के डांस किया जाता है. वहाँ पे बकायदा टोली का ये वाला सिस्टम.
और जैसे कि नीली जी ने पॉइंट आउट हमारे पास किया कि जियोग्राफिकल भी है उसकी एक वो वाली लिंकेज भी है कि आपने सिर्फ इस एरिया में परफॉर्म करना है. एंड आई थिंक परफॉर्मेंस इज़ एन इंटरेस्टिंग वर्ड. क्लियर पेमेंट ये लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल करती हैं जब वो बधाई का जिक्र करती हैं और टोली का जिक्र करती हैं, और इसके साथ एक इकॉनमी लिंक्ड है वेरी क्लियरली, वेरी नेचुरली. अब हम मॉडर्निटी की तरफ आ गए हैं तो नेचुरली जैसे सिस्टम्स और इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम्स इवॉल्व हो रहे हैं, ये वाली चीज़ भी चेंज हो रही है. और इसी सकाफत के ज़रिए आपका ख्वाजा सराओं का तसव्वुफ़ के साथ और अल्लाह के साथ और खुदा के साथ एक रिश्ता भी था. तो जैसे आपने तसव्वुफ़ की बात की और हम सुनते हैं कि अलिफ लाम मीम मोहम्मद ऐन अली कह जाना, बाकी अन बन इन बिन उन बुन क्या, you know. So आज की, as a Muslim transgender woman who has linked herself also with tasawwuf and found herself in tasawwuf and molayat, इस मॉडर्न डे इकोनॉमी के अंदर जहाँ पे इंडिजिनस ख्वाजा सरा इकोनॉमिक सिस्टम्स डिसरप्ट हो रहे हैं जिनका तसव्वुफ के साथ एक ताल्लुक था, मॉडर्न डे ख्वाजा सराज जो आज की हमारी बच्चियां हैं उनके लिए कोई पैगाम, कोई मशवरा, कोई सोच कि किस तरीके से वो अपना तसव्वुफ के साथ, खुदा के साथ रिश्ता बहाल कर सकती हैं, करना चाहिए कैसे? आई नो वी आर गेटिंग इनटू प्रीची टेरिटरी, I know, which is what I'm underscoring over here. लेकिन ये मेरा कहना इसलिए बनता है because I've also been through an atheist phase, a very major one. और उस फेज का होना बहुत ज़्यादा ताल्लुक मेरी ख्वाजा सरा होने के साथ ही था, बिकॉज मुझे ये लग रहा था कि मुझे मेन स्ट्रीम इस्लाम से ज़बरदस्ती पुश आउट किया जा रहा है, आउट ऑफ नोवेयर ज़बरदस्ती मुझे खींच खींच के निकाला जा रहा है, अप अंटिल आई रियलाइज कि नहीं मेरी तो जगह ही जगह है. एंड दैट हैपेंड थ्रू ख्वाजा सरायत, दैट हैपेंड थ्रू द ख्वाजा सरा सिस्टम. And now, for instance, if I'm going to Data Darbar, or if I go to Lal Shabazz Kalandar in Sevan Sharif, as the moment I enter the gate and I cross the security checkpost, all of the security guards basically say, bola, 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 Sakhi Lal Kalandar. In my respect, कि ख्वाजा सरा आए हैं इनकी इज्जत में तो आपको होता है कि मेरी इतनी जगह मेरे लिए इतनी इज्जत. So how do we bridge this gap for people who are growing up with the globalized modern day LGBTQIA identity, which I'm not challenging, by the way, I'm just saying, कैसे इसको तसव्वुफ को और मौलायत को तलाश किया जाए?
बहुत ज़रूरी बात है कि लोग अपने मतलब अपनी इस्लामी सकाफ़त इसमें फ़ख्र होना चाहिए. और आजकल के मैं जनरलाइज नहीं करना चाहती हूँ, लेकिन कभी-कभी मुझे लगता है कि आजकल के जवान लोग जो है हमारी मतलब सारी उम्मत में, लेकिन ख़ास तौर से यहाँ पाकिस्तान में, वो अपने इस्लामिक वैल्यूज़ तुर्की सोप ओपेरा से लेते हैं और टिकटॉक से लेते हैं. लेकिन असली इस्लामिक वैल्यूज़ जो है वो है बाबा बुल्ले शाह की शायरी में, सुल्तान बाहू की शायरी में, शाह अब्दुल लतीफ़ की शायरी में. यही है इस्लामिक वैल्यूज़, और ऐसे इस्लामिक वैल्यूज़ को वैल्यू करना चाहिए. And if people will do that, then they will see also, if they really study this, they will see that this is actually, it's not some kind of local confusion or something. It's very much the values of Baba Bulle Shah are the same values of Maula Ali, of Rasulullah, of Quran Sharif. If you really study that, you understand that, and you realize that there's so much beauty in there, and that beauty has a space and a place for everybody. It's about creating a world. And I think this is the thing. This is why people become transphobic or they become racist or something. There's this paranoia, this fear. If everybody gets a piece of the cake, then there won't be any cake left for me anymore. And people get this negative about it, and they feel threatened. But no, it's not about that. It's not about taking away anything from anybody. It's about creating a culture where, as Bulle Shah says, where we don't break anybody else's heart, and then also nobody won't break our heart. And I think we need to work towards that all together, and not think that we can define for other people how life should be. This is a big problem. Men thinking that they can define for women how life should be. Straight people thinking that they can define for queer people how life should be. Cis people thinking that they can define for trans people how life should be. No, we all have a place in this diversity of creation that God has given us.
ਪੜ੍ਹ ਪੜ੍ਹ ਇਲਮ ਹਜ਼ਾਰ ਕਿਤਾਬਾਂ ਕਦੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਪੜ੍ਹਿਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਤੇ ਜਾ ਜਾ ਵੜਨਾ ਮੰਦਿਰ ਮਸਜਿਦ ਕਦੇ ਮਨ ਆਪਣੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੜਿਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ. Thank you so much, Leila, and
Thank you very much.
we would love to take audience questions in the few minutes that we have remaining. We have a hand over there, and we have a hand over there, and we have a hand over there, and a hand over there. I'll remember these four. So let's start with.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you so much for this very insightful conversation. I think ना सिर्फ कि जो गुफ्तगू की गई बल्कि also the fact that ये गुफ्तगू यहाँ पे हो रही है was one of the reasons why I think a lot of people have turned up, because this conversation is so limited. And maybe Mehrub के अगर if you tune into the Insta lives that you have, उसमें शायद ये वो education आपको मिल रही होती है, और उसी से गालिबन मेरा सवाल भी stem होता है. I do give the caveat कि I completely understand कि the burden of education should not lie on the trans community, but rather insist people to actually learn as opposed to उनको. और दूसरा safety वाला aspect कि safety of people who we are talking about. लेकिन सवाल ये कि अगर allyship के बारे में बात की जाए, and allyship from, let's say, for example, people who are actually open to learning, open to having these conversations, open to educating themselves, for a community that's very closed, for a community जिसका culture, जिसमें जो घराने होते हैं उसमें बाहर के लोगों का अंदर आना. इवन सेवन शरीफ में फॉर एग्जांपल देखा जाए कि जो ख्वाजा सरा जो पूरा ट्रेडिशन होता है उसमें सिस लोगों का दाखिला या इवन जाना या इवन उसके बारे में इंक्वायर करना, पता करना is practically impossible. So my question is कि how does what does allyship look like at a point when the education is very limited to academic forums as opposed to practical on ground in nature?
questions. सारे सवाल ले लेते हैं क्योंकि मेरे ख्याल से कुछ common streaks भी होंगी. But thank you so much, Ghazi, for that wonderful question. So glad you're here. यहाँ पे सर मेरे ख्याल से आपका सवाल था. अच्छा जी, माइक जहाँ आप पहुँच गया.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम, आपने बहुत अच्छा एक्सप्लेन किया. मेरा क्वेश्चन ये था, हाउ कैन वी सपोर्ट ट्रांसजेंडर यूथ इन देयर जर्नी ऑफ सेल्फ एक्सेप्टेंस एंड सेल्फ डिस्कवरी?
allyship की एक streak आ रही है, उसके गिर्द गिर्द हमारे पास सवाल है. इन हजरत का एक सवाल है और फिर उन सर का भी एक है.
मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि हमारी हिस्ट्री में, कल्चर में हम ख्वाजा शरा को रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं और उन्हें इस तरह आपने बताया प्योर और वाइज, ये हमारा एक कॉन्सेप्ट है. आप फिर इसको LGBTQ XYZ प्लस में कैसे लिंक करते हैं, क्यों लिंक करते हैं?
मैंने तो कभी नहीं किया. आपस की बात है भाई मेरे. मैं खुद वो वीडियोस देख रही होती हूँ. कि मैं अच्छा लेकिन
First of all, thank you, Moiz. I hope you remember me. I know you since my childhood. My name is Beth.
yeah, because I was like, that name is only used by my mom, dad, and siblings. Where is Moise coming from? Okay.
मैं तो आपके मत समझे हाथों में ही बड़ा हूँ एक तरह से. तो since Aptabad times और इस तरह, तो मतलब मेरा जो ख्वाजा सरा कम्युनिटी के साथ जितना इंटरेक्शन रहा है, इवन इन पेशावर एंड इवन इन लाहौर, मतलब मैंने ये चीज़ बहुत ज़्यादा डिस्कवर की है कि वो मौलायत और वो स्पिरिचुअलिज्म, मतलब जो जो वाइब होती है इनकी. मैं आपको अपना पर्सनल एक्सपीरियंस अगर शेयर करूं, बचपन में मुझे एक स्फीयर इशू शुरू हुआ था कि मेरे माइग्रेन्स नहीं रुकते थे और सिर फटा जाता था और लोग कहते थे जादू है जादू है. इवन माय फादर यूज्ड टू से जादू है जादू है जादू है, ये मर जाएगा ये मर जाएगा मर जाएगा. सो जदून प्लाजा जहाँ पर अभी बना हुआ है, वहाँ पर एक होते थे, तो उन्होंने बस मुझे उठाया और उन्होंने बस कुछ पढ़ा और मतलब उसके बाद मुझे आज तक कभी इस तरह की प्रॉब्लम नहीं हुई. तो इसमें सिर्फ अगर मैं सोचता चले जाता था कि नहीं, मतलब हम मौलवी साहब के पास बैठते हैं तो वो इनको बुरा कहते हैं कि ये जी नाचते हैं, ये इस तरह करते हैं. मुझे तो उन्होंने ठीक कर दिया था. मुझे तो मौलवी साहब ने आज तक नहीं ठीक किया. उल्टा ये कहा है कि पैंची ऊपर करो और इतनी दफ़ा वज़ू करना है और ये करना है और वो करना है और इस तरह करना है और इस तरह करना है. तो मतलब ये चीज़ क्यों नहीं लोग समझ रहे. और भाईजान ने बहुत अच्छा पॉइंट रेस किया कि इसको थियोरेटिकली या आप किताबों के अंदर क्यों नहीं इन चीज़ों को डालते कि ये चीज़ भी लोग पढ़ें और लोगों को भी इंफॉर्मेशन मिले. और दूसरा क्राइम
मैंने डाल दिया किताबों में.
मैं लाजमी पढ़ूंगा. अच्छा, और दूसरा कि इनको क्राइम्स के साथ रिलेट किया जाता है ख्वाजा सरा कम्युनिटीज़ को, क्योंकि इनके पास हम इट इज़ मोर ऑब्वियस कि इनके पास कोई इस तरह का कोई प्लेटफॉर्म नहीं है कि इस तरह ऊपर आ सकें. ये सारे के सारे लोग एक अच्छी और अच्छी ज़िंदगी गुजार सकें. तो इनको मतलब क्राइम के साथ रिलेट नहीं करना चाहिए. मतलब सबको एक ऐसे फॉरम पे आना चाहिए कि कोई मुंह ना छुपाए, ख्वाजा सरा के पास खड़े हो के कोई मुंह ना छुपाए कि हम ख्वाजा सरा के पास खड़े हैं या इस तरह खड़े हैं या उस तरह खड़े हैं. तो थैंक यू सो मच.
Thank you so much for sharing that thought. That was beautiful. So quickly summarizing, allyship के ऊपर बात की गई है, burden of education के ऊपर, what can we do, and then just add your commentary
Yeah, a
to
lot
it.
of difficult questions actually. Thank you very much also for sharing that anecdote. That's very beautiful. लोग ये क्यों नहीं समझते मुझे भी पता नहीं है. ये पाकिस्तान का एक अंदरूनी मसला है. But that is, as I said, people take their Islamic values from all kinds of sources nowadays, but they don't take it from their actual Islamic sources here in this country, and that's one of the problems.
Pakistan is not seen as a site
Yeah.
of Islamic production.
Yeah.
That is very much a problem.
that
It's
is
only
a-
seen as a site of Islamic consumption.
Yes, very much. That's a good way to put it, indeed, and that has to change. But that is a larger educational issue. मैं बिल्कुल कायल हूँ कि हम तो ख्वाजा सराओं का मसला LGBTQI से कनेक्टेड नहीं करते हैं. लिंक नहीं करते हैं, हम ये नहीं करते, ये ग्लोबल डिस्कोर्स है जो ये कर रहा है, और we have to react to it somehow. That is why we have to include these perspectives. And of course, as I said, all social justice issues are connected, but not just sexual minority issues, but everybody who should be concerned for social justice, which ideally should be all of us. So that is actually my perspective. And I also think that whatever we say about sexuality and gender, it concerns everybody of you. Of course, हम खाजसरा और transgender लोग जो है हमारे अपने खास मसले होते हैं, लेकिन हर इंसान का एक मसला होता है उनके अपने जिन्स और सेक्सुअलिटी का. कोई इंसान नहीं है जिनके लिए ये issues आसान होती है. So this concerns everybody actually. We all are being a man, being a woman is complicated as well.
And difficult.
And difficult.
Manhood
as
is
well.
tough. Womanhood is tough.
Nowadays we see globally manhood is in such a crisis, and people flock to people like Andrew Tate and you know, and these kind of things because they don't know anymore how to be a proper man. So it's become very, very difficult. So these issues this is something we should all talk about and concern ourselves with. Definitely. Allyship. It's a good question, but also I think the community is actually not as close as it seems at first sight. The community, of course, is careful because it has experienced a lot of discrimination and a lot of threats. But there are now more and more, as I said, Neely started her work in the 1990s, coming out and doing that. There are so many activists now who are going in the public. There have been a lot of researchers who have engaged with the community, but you have to be you have to gain the trust of the communities first, and then they will allow you to come and visit them, but you have to become friends with them, you know. And this is a big problem that a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to do some research on this community. मुझे research करना है उन लोगों के बारे में. And then these journalists and these researchers, they come and they want to take their notes.
आपको लड़के पसंद हैं कि लड़कियां? पहला research question.
Yeah, ऐसे ही सवालात पूछते हैं जी. No, and then also then they leave and they use this for their own journalistic or academic success story, basically. But that is not how you gain trust of a community. And the community has seen this so many times, that they have allowed a journalist access, or they have allowed a researcher access, and then that journalist is creating some stupid story and that researcher is using it just for his own academic career. But there's कोई असली रिश्ता नहीं है researchers और community के बीच में. And you have to gain that, you have to create that dosti, that intimacy.
Thank you so much for that. Leila, your book is available where?
Usually it should be available where you can have
Just Google among the
Among the
Eunuchs,
Eunuchs.
and you'll find a link.
It's published by Hearst, and Hearst is cooperating also with what's it called, Oxford?
Oxford Publishing Press, OPP.
Yeah. So I know people who have bought it here in Pakistan, so it is accessible here.
It's accessible. Thank you so much for being a wonderful audience. And as you clap for Leila Jagiella, also clap for Alina Jan, who's the star of Joyland and is in the audience. बहुत अच्छा लगा आप सबसे मुलाकात करके, और कोई हमला नहीं हुआ हमारे पैनल पे. I am so bored. मैं भी अपनी फर्स्ट एड किट साथ लेकर आई हुई
हम
थी.
देखेंगे सोशल मीडिया पे लोग क्या लिखते हैं.
बहुत शुक्रिया आप सबका जी. अल्लाह ने के बाद.